construction advocates team. And it was an effort on their behalf to help their member districts have a resource they could go to help with facilities planning, assessment planning, and projects that they may want to plan. So we've done that now for about 9 years. I think we've been at least touched about 166 of the school districts in the state of Iowa. We haven't done assessments for all of those, but we've done a number. Like that?
Yeah,
That's
better.
Yeah.
That's it.
Sorry. Now I'm going to have to do karaoke. Now, anyway, so we've touched about 166 school districts. We haven't done assessments for all of those. And we've done a number of projects all over the state of Iowa, actual construction for those districts. So a lot of the numbers that you'll see tonight are based on historical cost data that we have from work that we've done around the state. And that's how we come up with a lot of the data. We're really in the role of giving the school districts the data that they can use to make educated decisions. So we're not making any decisions for the school board or even suggesting what they ought to do. We're just trying to provide the data that they can use to make good educated decisions on how to spend your tax dollars and make sure they have their priorities in the right place. So with that said, I'll start in. We did an assessment back in, was it April? Back in April of 2019 is when we actually did this assessment. And we looked at 2 locations when we did it, the high school, middle school, and the Pocahontas Elementary School, and then the Pomeroy building. So those were the 3 facilities that we actually did the assessment on. I'm not going to go through the entire assessment this evening. I'm just going to give you an idea of how it's put together, what we did to put that data together, and then, as Greg said, the full assessment, I believe, will be on the website. There's a lot of information in there. So, first of all, it might bore you if I went through it all night, but I just want you to know how it was put together and what's in the assessment. So the assessment, the items that you'll see in the assessment, the cost implications, will include all of the construction costs and ranges. And you'll see in there that there'll be a high and a low range. The reason for that is there are multiple options for a lot of those things, and those decisions need to be made by the district. So an example I use is asbestos abatement. On flooring, you can either actually remove all the asbestos-containing flooring and abate it and get rid of it, or you can encapsulate it and put another floor covering over it, which is a lot cheaper. Those are decisions you make, not us. So there's a range of costs. Same way with door hardware. There's a lot of those things have a range of costs. So you'll see a range as we go through that. So it has the construction costs and ranges. It has all of the design and construction management fees included, and it has a contingency included in the numbers that you'll see in the assessment. What it does not include is any land or property acquisition that the district might have to do in order to do projects. Any financing, like if there are any bonds or anything that are passed, any of those financing costs are not included. And then any escalation or inflation. So as the assessment gets older, you need to add escalation or inflation to those numbers that are shown in that. The contents, there's an executive summary. There's facility-specific breakdown, so each of those that we looked at will have a breakdown item by item. There's a total cost summary. There's an average cost summary and graphics that, again, this is just some different ways to look at the data. And then there are specific item solutions and costs by facility. So you'll see that it gets very detailed in that section with each of the facilities we looked at and the specific items that we found in the cost material. And then it talks about next steps. Once you have that data, what are some of the next steps that the districts might consider taking to move forward? So if we look at the executive summary, it's more narrative in nature. It talks about the district itself, how the assessment is put together. When we do these assessments, we don't do any destructive investigation, which means we don't knock any holes in any walls, we don't remove any pipes to see what they look like. We rely largely on the district's facilities people that go around with us when we do the assessment to let us know if there are things that aren't visible to us that we should know about. So those are incorporated in the assessment, but we don't necessarily tear anything apart to look at those things. So that tells you how we went about putting the assessment together. There's also some information about the district itself and some of the financing options that are available. The funding options on the right that you see there, we obtained those from Piper Jaffray. And those might have changed some even since we looked at those. So those change as time goes by, so you need to look at those from time to time. The next thing we looked at was facility-specific breakdowns. So this takes the data that we got from the assessments, and it breaks it down by facility. So here's the elementary school, and it's broken into safety and security, building improvements, and a third section that we have that wasn't applicable here is site improvements. So you can see there the specific things that we looked at in the elementary school, and then the low and high cost range. And I explained kind of why that was. And then next to that is a priority. And the priority is set up by A is urgent, B is required, C is recommended, and D is suggested. So A means you should take care of that very quickly. It's something that probably needs to be taken care of. A B, required, would be something that is required and probably should be done within the next 1 to 5 years. Recommended are things that it would be good that you do, and you should work them into your facility plan as soon as you can. And then suggested are kind of those wish list things that, well, if you've got everything else done and you'd really like to think about being right, everything you wanted to do, those would be the next things to consider. So that's a start at kind of a prioritization of the things that you should consider. Here's the high school, middle school, and again, it's all the same type of information, and it's put together in the same way. There were some site improvements on the high school, middle school, and those things will be broken down specifically in the specific breakdown I'll show you here in a minute. There's the Pomeroy building, things we found there. At the bottom, you'll see some options for that. Those options were to demolish the entire facility, including the gym, to demolish the facility and leave the existing gym and build back the auxiliary facilities that you need for that gym, like locker rooms and restrooms and that sort of thing. And the third one there is to build a brand new gym in some location. Decided where that might be. So, those were the options on the Pomeroy building. The total cost summary, this we look at for total cost by facility, total cost by category. So what we're looking at is the elementary school, that gives you the low and high totals, high school low and high totals, and the Pomeroy building high and low totals. And you'll see as we go through here, the Pomeroy building has a tendency to skew some of these charts because the cost range there is so large. But so it breaks it down by facility, and then it breaks it down by the categories of safety and security, building improvements, and site improvements. And then it breaks it down by priority. So we talked about the urgent, required, recommended, and suggested. So it breaks the costs down that way. These are all the same costs. So the totals are the same on each page. It's just breaking the data down in a different way to help you look at it in different ways if you need to. Average cost summary and graphics. This is just a graphic way to look at some of those same things. And when I say the Pomeroy building skews this a little bit, you can see average cost by facility. Well, that big gray portion is the Pomeroy building. So if you took the total cost in the assessment, that's the biggest piece of it. And then if you look at cost by category, building improvements is the biggest piece of that. Again, the Pomeroy building kind of skews that a bit. And then the last one is average cost by priority, being the urgent, required, recommended, or suggested. So again, it's just a different way to look at all of that same data. And this is a cost per square foot of facility to do the totals on those. So the elementary school was $3.09 per square foot if you did everything. The high school, middle school was $7.25 a square foot if you did everything. And again, the Pomeroy building is skewed, but that was $199.32 if you did everything at the Pomeroy building. So then we moved into the section of the assessment that shows the specific item, solution, and cost by facility. So this is the elementary school, and the first page of that, the first page of that will just give you some information about the facility itself, the age of it, the size of it, the current square feet per student, the average for elementary school. So in this instance, you guys are at about 156 square feet per student, and the regional average for elementary school is about 240 square feet per student. So you can see you're a little under what the average is for the region. So there's a number of different items on that front page. And then it starts moving into specifics. So here's a safety and security one, and accessibility. The hardware on some of the doors are not what they should be from an accessibility standpoint. So we've got an idea of what we found in the assessment, what the solution to that would be, the approximate number of or area that needs to be taken care of, and then a probable cost range for that specific thing. And we go through that. There's a number of so there's one for wire glass. Wire glass used to be what you had to use for safety glass, and that's no longer acceptable by code. Doesn't mean that you have to change it right now, but to be up to code, you should change it to the laminated fiberglass. So that was one thing we found. We also do the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. And so here's the assessment on the elementary school for some of those things. Some of them, what I'm doing, some of those things. And you can read the description and the solution and then what the probable cost range is for those. So each facility has that, and here's the middle high school. Again, we go through all the things we found, what the condition is now, what needs to be done, what the solution to that is, and then what the probable cost range would be for each specific thing that we found. And there's the mechanical, electrical, plumbing. And then we went on to the Pomeroy building, and again, same thing. Each of the sections is set up exactly the same way. And we have pictures of the existing condition, and then what the solution would look like if you actually put it in place. And then that was the roof on the Pomeroy building. And then the next, another section in there is next steps. Where do you go from here? And there's a section that talks about the next steps and how you get from where you are now to where you want to be. Talks about prioritization, which is kind of about where you are ready to start into. You've got the data, you kind of know the condition of your facilities, and now it's time for the board and the community to start saying, what are our priorities? Where do we want to move with what we know we have now? Once those priorities are set, then a lot of times we'll move forward with a selection of a designer if projects are identified. It just depends on what decisions are made within each individual district as to how we move forward with those steps. So next steps might be taking the assessment information and reviewing those findings, which we're in the process of doing now. Determine funding availability, what funds are available, and where you might want to go with that. And then we have a process we will go through with the district if you wanted to help with that prioritization of needs, and kind of helps everybody think about it out in the open and kind of all get on the same page before you move forward. Then the board decision, the priorities are established, and if we're directed to proceed a certain way, then we will assist with architectural selection. This is all a part of your membership to IASB. And then the integration part of it is Estes works with the architects during the master planning and make sure those budgets are fitting within your financial capabilities and that sort of thing. helping with scope, budget, schedule, and developing smart choices, which are choices that will give you the same effect for better value, perhaps. And then eventually the board approves design, scope, budget, and schedule, and then we move into the design and construction. And at that point, if you decide to move forward with Estes, then we cease being ICAT IASB and we become Estes Construction and manage the construction for you at that point. Through completion. This is a example of a prioritization exercise we did with South Payment not long ago. And the green dots were their first choice, the yellow dots were their second choice, blue dots were their third choice, and red dots were their fourth choice. And so you can see how it starts kind of getting everybody headed the same direction once you get that done. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because it's a little confusing as a slide. I might take that out of my next presentation. But it's a flow diagram of how you get from where you are now to actually completing the project, depending on whether you're going for a bond referendum or not. This gives you an idea of, with an integrated design, how a lot of the information is learned early in the project. So it gives you a chance to deal with that and make decisions early on. Where with the traditional approach where you design it and then bid it to a general contractor, that general contractor doesn't learn a lot of the details until late in the process. And so you don't have as much opportunity to deal with budget and options at that point. And again, here, as you go from design through construction to completion, the ability to control your costs is very high early in the project process, and it becomes more difficult the further you go. So the further you get into construction, the more costly changes are and making changes are. And at the same time, the cost of those changes go up as you get further into construction. So the optimum time to be making the decisions on your design so that it stays within your budget is as early as possible in the process. This is a slide that shows you 148 districts. This is a little old. I think we're at 166 now. Just some of them have done over 55 assessments at this point, over 63 projects. So we've been around the state and worked with a lot of districts. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Greg if the board has any questions.
Any questions from the board members?
The only comment I would have is that elementary school, the date of construction of the building, I think is wrong. It's got 1969 in there.
Does it?
And the elementary building would have been built prior to that.
So it's wrong in the assessment?
Yeah. We were talking, I wonder if that's the year the district bought it. So when the Catholic school, or when the Catholic church maybe, when the high school closed.
Can you guys use the microphone? Can't hear back here.
The one comment I wanted to make is, you probably noticed on the one slide, it said that the elementary school was built in 1969, and that obviously is inaccurate. We didn't notice that during our board meeting.
That one there?
Elementary school.
That would have been the addition.
That's all good. For original construction, 1969 it says, right? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
When was it actually built?
I think it says on the front on the cornerstone, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Did you know, Rich?
First half of the 50s.
First half of the 50s.
Not sure exactly when building.
If no one on the board has questions, we'll open it up to the audience. I can bring the mic around to anybody who has a question. I know there's he just did a very high overview, so it might be difficult to ask him questions, but if there's any slides, maybe in particular, one of the summary ones that had like the cost per building, if you can pull that back up, if people have questions on that.
I've got a couple. On the assessment of the buildings, especially obviously the Pomeroy one is very high.
Yeah.
I assume your assessment is to bring it up to standards for a school.
Correct.
It's not the overall assessment of the building as far as whether it could be used for other purposes.
No.
Or an indication of the soundness of the building. It's just strictly what it would take to bring it up to a school,
That's correct. Yeah.
which is significantly higher than what it could be to be used for other
Right, and just so you know, rule of thumb that most of the design and construction industry uses is if the cost of bringing an existing building up to code and up to use as a K-12 school facility is 70% or greater than a new facility, you should consider replacing it with a new facility. And so that's just a rule of thumb. I'm not sure where this one lands, but it's north of 70%. So for an elementary school, it doesn't make sense to turn it back into an elementary school. But you're right, it doesn't address, could you do something else with it?
More questions?
Yeah, my question was also the same with the Pomeroy School, because we don't use 3/4 of that building. It's completely locked off to any use. So whether there's safety issues or not, I mean, no one can even get to that part of the school. So I think those numbers are a little bit skewed. And I guess my question to the board and to is what is the cost per year that it takes to heat the Pomeroy School?
What we've done for that, and I'm not going to say this is 100%, gone back over the last 4 or so years and just tried to pull out what we had coded for that building in particular. It would have probably been easier with Jay still around as custodian to know, as we look through some of the bills, whether we caught everything or not. But we're running somewhere between $32,000 to about $60,000 per year just with the building sitting there.
And that's not just heat.
No.
No, that's heat, that's maintenance, repairs.
Heat so far this year, we've spent about $20,000.
So Diane
Right,
said
a
for
little-
heat this
a
year
little
so
below
far
that.
is a little over
18 to 20,000.
18 to
this year.
20,000
So
so far
far.
this year.
So I guess with those numbers and seeing the numbers that you proposed for the Pomeroy School, I mean, they're night and day different. So, I mean, that building can be affordably heated as opposed to spending mass amounts of money to do some deconstruction or something, from what I've seen in the brief overview. And then the other question, there was part of the proposal that talked about a new gym, and I guess I was wondering what town the new gym would be built in, and would the board be pushing for a bond issue on that?
As far as the new gym, no decisions have been made. That's something where we want feedback from all of you on that survey form. We want feedback from you so we can take that into account as we make any decisions, if that would be a path people want us to go down or the board wants to go down. So that was on the location. What was the second part again? I'm sorry. Pushing for a bond issue there. That would be one option, is to have a bond issue. And Joe, if I misspeak, correct me. One would be to have a bond issue. The other would be every year, everybody pays sales tax for schools in the state, and the district gets money for that. And some of that money we can spend on things like buses, building maintenance, or improvements. For example, the elementary remodel, that was $4 million, give or take. We didn't do a bond issue on that because we saved up money from that sales tax and we paid cash. The middle school addition over here on the high school, we borrowed against some of that sales tax money. Again, we didn't have to have a bond issue, so there's no property taxes, and we're using the sales tax money to pay for that. So that would be another option as well, is to be able to use some of that sales tax money potentially to do a new gym or any of these repairs, whichever it might be, fixing the gym down there, demolition, to cover those types of things. But that would not require a bond issue, that would have property taxes with it.
Can I go over here to somebody different first?
I'll be the name. I was wondering, does anybody take any enrollment of the future in consideration of growth as far as students or?
Typically, we try to do about a 10-year projection rolling when it comes to enrollment. All right, so we take a look at what the historical pattern has been. I also go back then and we start with the kindergarten and the preschool enrollment numbers, and we add those together basically. As we're sitting today, we're somewhere between stable and somewhere between that and about a 5-student decline per year is what we're currently projecting. Now, that doesn't take into account whether or not another neighbor, we have one that is trying to make some decisions on a middle school, would eventually be looking this direction for help. If that happens, that's not accounted for. It's not known, it's not a given. So we look at the historical and what we've actually got for students in the lower grades currently in order to kind of look at where we're headed. So right now, it looks approximately in that 5-student-ish range if everything holds as we currently see it to be. That estimate is good as it is today, because if something dramatically changes in this region, obviously those numbers can change too. But we do definitely look at that as we're trying to make estimates. Good question.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've spent over $1 million out of the sports complex, $36,000 just for a backstop. But I didn't see anywhere in your projection as far as a new bus barn.
The bus barn was not part of this evaluation. That is something that is on the board's radar now as one of the next projects as well. So that would have to be taken, we've already purchased the land for that. That would have to be taken into account as we plan for anything on this sheet. So we would have to take that into account before we decide to do, overall, what are we going to do? The bus barn, these items as priorities, and we do that as part of our planning when we set priorities.
Am I correct on the $100?
Yeah, it's real close to that. It's what, 1.1 with the change order we had, I think. So yeah, it's real close to that.
How are you funding that?
Sales tax dollars and the physical plant and equipment levy dollars, which is a small portion of the regular property tax levy that the district has. And that's money that we have saved up to be able to pay cash for that.
You're not borrowing that?
No, we have not borrowed for that. The only borrowing the district has that is property tax related is for the building you're sitting in right now.
Craig, would you want to mention the age of the bleachers and everything out at the sports facility?
Part of the reason that we did all the bleachers out at the sport facility, one is they're not handicap accessible. The football field was, what do we figure, 40 plus years old, maybe even 50 years old. And due to age and condition, it was just one of those things that was time they needed to be done. In fact, we had a visitor from one of our neighboring communities here this summer that fell and shattered an ankle as they fell off the bleachers this year. So the liability is also a priority when we decided to do that project. More questions?
I'm just kind of curious, would the cost of the Pomeroy building be less if we would have had kids in it for the last few years?
I don't know that, I don't know if kids being in it would make a difference. If it had been in use and it had, I don't know that kids being in it necessarily would have, but if you're talking about if it had been in use, it probably would have made some difference, yeah. Just because the condition of a building, it's like houses, you know, if they're not lived in, they for some reason, they tend to go downhill. I would guess there's some of that taking place.
So the school owns a couple properties here around the school that sit vacant. Why is that, and how does that serve our district as far as, you know, owning property that we're doing absolutely nothing with?
Which property are you referring to? The houses?
The houses.
So the district owns two houses that are adjacent to the property. One is the one on the corner here as you come in the driveway. One is over here kind of on the other corner next to Dick Gruber's house, if you know where. If you come in the back driveway by the weight room, there's a house there, and then the one next to it, kind of around the corner, the district owns that. We also own a vacant lot over here. As properties have come up, basically on this block, the district, the board, each time any of those have come up for sale, the board has evaluated it and decided whether or not it's a good option. We should purchase those properties to protect the interest of the district. For example, this house over here, it comes right, the garage comes right out into the district's driveway essentially. And we thought it's better that the district own that property than let somebody else move in there. You have traffic going in and out, you got kids going in and out, that it's just better to protect the interest of the districts owning that adjacent property. The ones over there are basically the same thing, but we don't have any specific plans for any of those at this time, other than long range, they need to be demolished or moved or whatever needs to be done with it.
That's fine. I would rather have you ask.
Okay, when this school was built, that's when they shut the Pomeroy School down. It housed the junior high and the elementary, and I think it did have elementary maybe after that, but the junior high moved to this building.
Not right away.
Yes, it did.
No, we had a couple of years where we were still down there.
In this building? The junior high came up here though. But what year did the junior high come up there?
We physically moved into this building in 2000 and the spring of 11, I believe. So we would have physically moved into this building that we're sitting in spring of 2011. I want to say it was April-ish, because I remember we moved during the blizzard to try to get things from the old building back over to this building. I can go back and look at timelines, but the transition out of Pomeroy did not happen immediately, because during the construction on the elementary project in town, we actually moved students from Pocahontas, cleared that building empty, moved them down to Pomeroy for that period of time, and that project didn't finish on time. So that was an extended project. So it was not tied to this building in any way, Troy.
No, I mean, I'm just, my point, I'm still getting my point, but.
Okay.
So, anyways, at the time that you moved the junior high and the high school here, there was told that there was plenty of space for both the junior high and the high school. So why the need for an addition, for the $2 million addition? Because as far as I know, we have less students enrolled today than before we put that addition on.
I can go back and look at some numbers that had come up, Troy. I think we're down 10-ish over the number of years, which falls into the line with that give or take 0 to 5 student drop per year in terms of those numbers. All right, part of the addition piece though had to do with trying to make additional room because we were tight in this building. I'll be honest with you, there's also discussion, and was even back at that point in time, how long our neighbors to the northwest could hold on to their 7th and 8th grade classrooms. So the decision the board made at that time was to look in addition so that we had the space we needed here without having students literally on top of themselves and in section sizes that were too large. Because we were running with sections that were getting up close to 30 in a grade in terms of class sizes. That was larger than what the board or the administration or staff was comfortable with at that point in time.
So in your report, you said that the square footage for our elementary was 155, and normal was about 2 1/4. So we've got like 66% of normal square footage.
The regional average.
Correct. So if we're just packed in there like sardines, and I know that that's a problem when it comes to lunchtime, what is the district proposing for that?
How about if I come over here? It'd be easier than going back and forth. I wouldn't say we're packed in sardines at this point in time. Your average class size at the elementary right now is sitting at approximately 15 to 17, except at grade 6. At grade 6, your section size goes up, because at that point in time, the students with Pocahontas Catholic also join the district. So when that transition happens, the class sizes go up. Well, we've got class sizes currently at the elementary that are 15. There might even be 1 or 2 that are slightly below 15 at the current time. So what we're talking about total square footage, what we don't have is an overabundance of storage space. Your class sizes, if you walk through that building, are not what I would say, you're not smashed together. You're not crowded in that building. What you fail to have is the ability to store things, so we are now having to transport items from the high school or some bus barn, other locations, because we can't physically store those items in the elementary proper. We don't have spaces for meetings for IEP students or other types of meetings, so we use the central office building and they come over and utilize the space over there. So it's the smaller function space, it's not the classroom space that is your issue.
Joe, I might add something to that too. That regional average is based on schools that they may have an elementary school with, a large gym, a large cafeteria, a kitchen. I'm not real sure what your elementary school has. So that square foot per student is total square feet per student. So I wouldn't want to stand here tonight and say, oh, you're way undersized, because I don't know enough about what's going on inside your elementary school. All that says is that regionally, elementary schools have about 200 and whatever it was square feet per student. So you kind of have to look at your specific situation, what you're doing. You may have shared space with other facilities. I just don't know. So you need to take that into account too as you're looking at those numbers.
So I guess my question is, when we did all this construction, how come those were not foreseen issues? I mean, storage is something that's pretty, you always have to have storage, whether it's a garage on a house or a basement. I guess if those are our issues, then how come they weren't foreseen when we were spending the money to do these construction types?
You've got multiple things, I think, Troy, that the board tries to take into account. You brought up a couple tonight. You're talking about the tax rates, how those things are funded. The elementary was funded on straight up cash based on what they had saved. That limits the scope of what can be done in one shot, right? So that's part of what you're looking at in terms of that. Your other pieces of prioritizing. You brought up another item, which was trade out basically the bleachers out of the sports complex. That was a safety issue. Safety issues in any location takes priority over wants, because it becomes what I would classify as a need. Because above everything, foremost, the major priority for this district, and I think I can safely state for the board, is the safety of students. So those items are going to take forefront every single time as far as a recommendation from myself, and I don't think the board would look at it any differently. And I can't imagine the community would feel any different, that the safety of students should be first and foremost.
Mine's just a simple, what do you see as a timeline going forward? When does the board, obviously they gotta make some decisions on the property, especially the Plumright property. What do you envision as being the timeline going forward? Or how soon do you want to act?
Let's take a stab at that first.
I can take it or you can. I guess here's what I would answer to that. There isn't a set timeline. All right, this is the beginning of this process. We've knocked off the things we could. We decided we needed some outside input. All right. Board felt very comfortable working through School Board Association's arrangement with Estes as far as the ICAT process, because it brings in someone from the outside. It's not our TSP or one of the other architects that we've worked through, that quite honestly their recommendations also skew with how much of a percentage they're going to earn. So we're trying to focus in on the needs of the district. Timeline hasn't been set. Part of the process was to have the study done first. Boards had a first look at that. At the last meeting, the board said we now need to have a look at that in front of the community and solicit input from the community. Then they're going to have to go back and talk about that prioritizing session or something similar to it to start pinpointing what type of items to take first priority. They've been doing this for years, but now it's time to start looking at some bigger things that we're not talking about just replacing a little section of roof or changing out some windows. Now we're talking about some bigger items.
I think you're almost 2 to 3 years down the road. Knowing how construction projects go.
It could be. I just can't give you a number.
You got designs.
Yeah. My luck on construction isn't the best, I'll be honest with you.
Last time I was in Pomeroy, there were trophies, pictures. There were pictures, trophies, whatnot, memories of Pomeroy cycles. Is there, those still in that building, are they being taken care of, stored? Is there any opportunity for somebody other than PAC to maybe take that property?
What we've done in the past, yes, they're still there. All right, that part I can tell you. You walk in, the trophy cases are all filled, they're still there. Class photos are still on the walls. So those items have not been touched or removed. So yes, they are being maintained. They're still present. What we have done in the past, if you go back and take a look at the Rolfe building, board actually worked with the city of Rolfe, and a number of those trophies are now resting in the public library, but in a public entity up there. They still remain the property of the school district, but they're entrusted to the community in order to keep them inside the community of the property itself. There have been discussions on doing something similar, but no decisions have been made moving forward yet. That would be a part of this ongoing discussion that the board would have. But past practice would match up to what you're talking about, and that is doing something along those lines.
Well, that might not be a question about the district, but I'm understanding that they're playing baseball in the newer gym in Pomeroy. And I'm understanding that that's why the 2 windows were broke out of the 2 little doors, and the paint is chipping off the north wall, big chunks, and you can see little spots on the floor. I feel like maybe that shouldn't be happening? Because what if somebody would want that gym eventually, and if it turns into looking like crap, nobody is. That's just my opinion, but anyway, does anybody know if they are playing baseball?
Couldn't say for sure. I know in the past, before the building was rekeyed, we did have some of that going on because there were so many keys floating around. Because I know at one point in time, we had issues where someone brought in, whether it's a pitching mound or a pitching machine or something with the dirt and everything else. So that is what actually kind of led up to the rekeying of the building, so that there was some ability to try to control who's coming in and for what purposes, while at the same time maintaining some community use of those facilities. So individuals come in and they've got almost like an open gym type of environment. We have little kids groups that go in and practice as well. We've got other groups that have meetings inside the building as well. So we're trying to work with our neighbors basically to be as accessible as possible and still have some ability to know.
Beat up,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it might be a history, but we let it go down with respect.
Yep. Totally agree.
If you guys do decide to tear down everything online and say it is 2 to 3 years, and you build a gym up here, which is where it will be built, where is for the feeder kids, and the kids trying, how is there going to be any time for anybody to do anything in these gyms? Because you got, what, the high school, which, will that still be here? I mean, I know we got to talk about it, or I'm sure that the both of those will stay, and we'll build somewhere else, but when you tear down Pomeroy, where do my kids go to, do they get on a bus and go up to the Lorenz? I know we're trying to pull them in. That's a jump for me living in Pomeroy. So I'm just curious, is that what will end up happening? Is my kids will have to go all the way to the Lorenz and back to Pomeroy? Is that making any sense?
No, I understand what your question is. I think, I don't want to speak for the board, I'm speaking for one board member here, I'm not speaking for the whole board. If we decide to do something with the building in Pomeroy, whatever that may be, right now we have a need for that gym space in our community. You know, I know they do a lot of the youth stuff down there, they do some up here too, and there's, I think Brandon or somebody has a schedule to try and coordinate all that. I don't see how we could tear that down or do anything without getting a replacement somewhere else. Whether that's here, whether it's in Pomeroy, I don't know. That's one of those decisions that would have to be made. But there's going to have to be some kind of replacement for that. And then I would assume, and I shouldn't probably do that, but you'd be trading one for one, so to speak. So hopefully there still should be the same amount of space, and it would just be a matter of scheduling where that is. I know as a board, there's been discussion, about using things in Lorenz. And one of the concerns has been what you just mentioned, the distance from Pomeroy, or especially anybody that lives south of Pomeroy, to go all the way to Lorenz and trying to avoid some of that, because it is a long haul for kids on a bus or parents to run kids up there, that type of thing. So that's something we've been trying to keep in mind as we have these discussions.
And I'm just nervous if that happens. If that is the case, I'm afraid we're going to lose kids in the school district because we're going to go 8 miles to the east instead of 25, 30 miles north. It makes sense to me.
No, that's right, and that's a discussion the board has had. In fact, the question was asked about the middle school edition. That was part of it. Mr. Kramer talked about it earlier, where we have a neighboring district that the planning was, we want this to be the place where people want their kids to go to school. We don't want them to go to Manson. We don't want them to go to West Bend. We want them to come here because that's important. We've got to have kids in the chairs in the school if we want to keep it open and keep it successful. And so as we do this planning, that's one of those balance things that the board is trying to do, is how do we continue making that appeal to people to be the district that, this is the district they want to teach their kids.
if the Pomeroy building is going to be used, possibly the gym, for the next 2 or 3 years, is there any maintenance that's being done to keep the mold at bay in the building? Because you can smell the mustiness even as you walk in the entryway, and it's only going to get worse.
In terms of maintenance, yes, Kathy, it's still going on. I've got a custodian that makes a trip down to the Pomeroy building on a daily basis. The classroom section, probably not. The other part, yes. Lunchroom's been sealed off, so that one, the lunchroom proper, I know has not been cleaned or made. Well, the problem is you don't have a ventilation system in there, Kathy. So could it be cleaned? Yes, it could be, but we'd have to invest that every single day in the same way that we did while we were using the building. That phenomenon is not new. And you might remember that from being on the board too.
Did you say the basketball games not being held in our building this year because it's not safe for people to read here?
No, I'm not aware that we've ever had that conversation or discussion, Kathy, so I'm not sure where you've heard that. But
no basketball games are being held this year because
I've not heard that. I'm not going to say someone isn't saying it, but I haven't heard it, Kathy.
okay, how come we're not having it?
Part of that discussion was trying to keep the items centrally located. We were splitting between Pomeroy and Lorenz. All right, there was some concern and feedback in terms of splitting distances. It started off by having the games or practices and one game down there, but it's primarily practices. The games will try to move into the central location because we are pulling students from the northwest as well as from the south. Geographically, we are 387 square miles, not counting where the Lorenz Marathon students come from. When you incorporate that region in, we're somewhere between probably 500 and about 525 square miles in terms of geography where students are coming in from. So it's trying to look at that central location as far as locations are concerned as much as anything. I'm not going to say someone didn't say it, but I can tell you I've never heard it at the board table or by administrative meetings as a reason why we're not doing things down there.
My question may be a little bigger than the next meeting, but communities like Pomeroy, like Lorenz, when you pull the elementaries out of these schools, it also pulls away the children and the parents that bring them. You mentioned being out of average size for elementary age kids. I understand centralization, bringing everybody to Pocahontas, and we're all one big happy family. On the flip side of that, please consider what you're also doing with communities that you're pulling these children out of. Because all of a sudden now, nobody wants to move into Pomeroy because the school is in Pocahontas. The kids that are in Pomeroy right now, I don't know of any kids that haven't at least brought up the subject. Why don't we just open it over and I think these are things that are worthy of discussion and consideration. I know, I get it, centralization, there's really benefits to that. And I don't see any benefits of how that helps us. Could you at least consider that?
That is something the board talks about. You know, I was on the board when the decision was made to close the building in Pomeroy. And it wasn't an easy decision because of just what you're talking about. I know the Lorenz board members, as we met with them, they talked about the same thing. Basically, though, in a nutshell, it boils down to finances. And the way the state of Iowa allocates money to schools, it's just financially not feasible, unfortunately. Because of the way the finances work, you know, everybody in here, everybody in the whole district could say, you know what, double our property taxes tomorrow. Because we want a building in Pomeroy, we want a building in Rolfe, whatever. And unfortunately, that's not the way it works. We can't do it that way. The state won't allow us. So while the board, I think, would like to do exactly what you're talking about, we try to keep that in mind as long as we can. But unfortunately, the way school law is in Iowa, the finances just don't work out, unfortunately, for us to try and do that. I totally get what you're doing and what you're talking about. 30 years ago, when I was in high school, I went through a merger, same thing, buildings closing. You know, I saw it as a student, and it's hard on the communities, but unfortunately, you know, it's the guys down and gals in the Golden Dome in Des Moines that set that policy, and we're the ones that have to live with it. We really have no say in it. So the next time you see Mike Sexton or Tim Cryinframe, I'll put a little commercial in, lobby for more school funding. Point that out to them that you're paying attention to how they vote, because it would help us on things like that.
Right in the middle.
So my question is on funding and such like that. I'm naive on how funding goes for school. For example, it comes from taxes and revenues and products such as that. When bonds are brought up for school funding, and you're talking about communities making decisions about what goes on, is the entire, say, community as far as Pocahontas area concerned, will they vote on bonding issues? Or when we do spend money that is collected or saved from tax revenues, sales tax like that, does community not have any say in that? I'm just kind of curious on how that works. As I'm assuming bond issues are brought to vote by the communities.
GO bonds require a vote. All right, so that's a general obligation bond. That's the type of financing system that was used for the construction of this building. All right, so that was done at $4.05 per thousand of your property tax. All right, so that's totally property tax. Your GO bond is property tax. You then have a revenue purpose bond. That's borrowing against the 1 cent sales tax or the voted portion of Pebble. All right, community voted Pebble, not the board approved portion of it. That cannot be bonded against, just the voter approved portion of it. All right, that one, the board ultimately has probably jurisdiction over. A GO bond has to have community approval. All right, whether that's at the 270 level or the 405 level. If you go to 405, then you actually have to have 2 questions on the ballot in order for that type of bond vote.
And you say community,
All communities that make up the district. So when I say the word community, I'm talking about us as a quotation community. All right? Because you've got a lot of communities that make up our school district.
Now, are votes levied or?
Hold on a second, I want to add something to that. You know, Joe mentioned that it's ultimately up on the revenue type bonds, it's up to the board, but you do still have a say. You can call any of us that are on the board, you can come to the board meeting and express your opinion to us, and don't think that doesn't have an impact because we do listen to you. So while you don't get to go into the ballot box and check a box, yes or no, you still have a say in that. You can contact all of us.
Well, I guess what I'm getting at is that Pomeroy, sort of this population base, Pomeroy is logistically smaller than Pocahontas is. So when we do a vote on anything, usually loudest voices carry the vote. And it's kind of curious, when population bases are smaller, is there any way to levy those up to where it can be brought up to be equal to the votes of the higher population base? So it's kind of, I'm drawing lines in the sand, I guess, here between towns, but I'm just asking because it comes down to a decision on these buildings. It's not come down to personal feelings of office. And that's what I'm getting at, is that in Pomeroy, we'll probably feel like we're going to kind of get ousted on the whole voting situation of this when it comes to the vote on this building, and demolishing or keeping it apart or whatnot. So I'm getting at, so I think that's probably what's on people's minds. And that's why we want to know that our voices be heard loud and clear about what we want to do with this building.
I would just comment, I think, you know, you'll be heard. Ultimately, you know, there's no weighted voting or anything like that, you know, but your voices will be heard. Yeah.
I've been on the board for 14 years. I'm not
currently right now, but what everybody has forgotten about tonight, everybody's talked about taxes, drum on, seeing who's telling us whose. You haven't talked about the kids. Okay? So at the end of the day, what are we doing what's best for the kids? It's not about the taxes. It's not about this. It's what's best for the kids. That's why we came to vote. Because they offered what was best for our kids. Right? As time goes on here, people have to look at bus drivers. We have a bus director right here. We do not have bus drivers that are very well engaged. So having things centralized is going to help the efficiency of the school in the future. Right? It's not somebody trying to demolish a building in Pomeroy. It's about what's doing best for kids. An opportunity for kids for the area that we got. It's not about trying to ruin a small town. Okay? We all taught our kids to, go get education and move away. For the most part, correct? So we all have to remember what we have done in the past and how we decide for our future. But we have to remember what's best for kids. At the end of the day, right? Getting caught up over all this money stuff is fine, but what is best for kids? Keep that in mind.
I take offense to the bus driver deal, because I don't think I'm that old.
Very well, I think they're very well.
I guess I just want to address the board here at the end and say, there's some big numbers up there, and this district has spent a lot of money. And Jason is right, it's all about the kids, and so some of the parts that I brought up about the $1 million at the athletic complex, where can we benefit our children? And, whether that's spending $1 million to tear down a school when you could keep it up and running for years for 32 to 60,000, is our money better spent putting money in other places than demolishing something that the district obviously needs and doesn't need a new gym? It needs facilities, and it needs to do it in a cost-effective way. And I don't think that this district has spent money in a very cost-effective way in the past 10 to 12 years. And that's my feeling.
We'll disagree on that, but that's fine. I respect your opinion. It's your opinion. I respect that. I respectfully disagree. I think we've been trying to be very conscientious how we've spent the district's funds. If you look at a district with a new building, and we have one of the lowest tax rates because of how we've tried to practically manage our money. And we can disagree on how certain things have been spent, but I think we have, as a board, have tried to be very prudent with your tax dollars. That's my own personal opinion. Obviously, I'm probably biased because I want to make these decisions, but I think we've tried to do a good job of that. More questions or comments?
I'm actually going to go back to you because I want to know why, since the Pomeroy facility has been deemed not to be used, at least a portion of it for sure, why did we go back and look at bringing everything up to code? What was the purpose for that?
That was the purpose of the whole assessment. When we were asked to look at the facilities, the purpose of assessing those facilities, that was the whole purpose of the assessment. When we're asked to come and do an assessment of facilities, it's an assessment of what it would take to get them back up to a usable condition as a K-12 educational facility. So that's all we did. We looked at that facility and said to get from where you are now, have an operational K-12 facility that's up to code, accessible, and in a usable condition, how much money would that take? That's all that says. We made no judgment about whether you should, whether you shouldn't, whether that was the best use, whether you should use it, whether you should tear it down. We made no of those. All we do is provide data based on that. And one other comment I might make in listening to your discussion, this is not unusual. This is going on all over the state of Iowa, all over the state of Iowa. we're working with ICAM Manning School District right now. And they've got Manila, and they've got Irwin, and they've got Manning. And they have had the same discussion. And they all came around to what this gentleman back here talked about and decided they were going to look at it as what's best for our kids. And they've come a long, long way. But their discussion started out just like yours is starting out. And I say that because I don't want you to get discouraged. It takes a lot of discussion and a lot of thinking and a lot of coming around and listening to each other to get to a final solution. So you're not there tonight. It'll take a little while, but don't feel isolated like you're the only community that's got this problem, because it's everywhere in the state of Iowa. A lot of it has to do with the funding mechanism. A lot of it has to do with it just doesn't make sense from an educational standpoint for it to be set up the way it was in the past. So I just wanted to let you know that shouldn't feel alone.
These are probably for you guys now. So I'm hearing a little bit about Lorenz, but not having a child in school, but do having grandchildren in the school. What is the situation with Lorenz? Are we using a gym there, or? And then I have another question after that.
So we do, and Joe, maybe I should just let Mr. Granger answer. We're using it for practices, correct?
Lorenz Gym and Palmer Gym both get used on a limited basis for practices. It comes down to functionality where games are being held, so the practices can still be held as well. Going back to almost maybe over a year ago, or at least a year ago, the discussion of how you rotate those so that we don't have all practices for boys in one location, because that means every boy from the south, I'll go back 2 years ago, practices for the boys, I believe, were in Lorenz. Earls Middle School was down in Pomeroy. And so anyone from the north had extra driving going back on a regular basis that was consistent. Any boy living to the south had extra driving because of everything being held in the north, and trying to flip those around a little bit more. And where possible, try to get the games more centrally located so that it was easier for parents to be able to get there, grandparents to be able to get there to support the kids. So that was part of that discussion in terms of where do you house the games. We only use the Pomeroy building when there's not something locally in town here available, either between the gym here and the elementary as a general rule. They only use the Lorenz gym when something is going on where we need both gyms at once, or they need it for some other purpose. But for the most part, the focus has been, the board discussion has been, Pomeroy is a part of the district, so it is the priority location first. The other is used as a secondary when there isn't the ability. The trade-off is if you don't do that, then your practices are going until 7:30 or later at night, which is an option given the number of gyms, but it's not, the board has not been the board's belief or the administration's belief that having kids in ball practices later in the evening is what's best for kids. They need to get home to their families.
Okay, this is actually, I know that when we pull kids away from home to take them somewhere else, that probably is not as good for a kid as being in their own home. So when a kid has to travel so far to do things, the parent has to make one decision, and that is, do I want to have my kid traveling and home less, or do I not want them to be involved in athletics or drama or speech or music or band? Do I have to keep them at home, and therefore my kid is not as involved as what I believe makes a really rounded child in their development? So I'm hoping this assessment that gave all these huge numbers for Pomeroy as being demolished, or to bring it back up to code, if that's probably not what's going to happen, I'm kind of baffled as to why we didn't have some other options, but maybe that's not at all what you do, and maybe that's what you look at next. But I'm kind of agreeing with Troy, and that's the fact that if we're thinking we need another gym as a help, I don't understand why you would build something new rather than put a little bit of money, maybe less, into one of the gyms that we already have and make use of all of them. and thereby keeping some of your kids closer to their homes rather than dragging them or making their parents make the choice of not having them involved at all. That's just my thought. I live right across the street from the school, so kids were hardly anywhere gone other than what they participated in.
I guess I just wanted to comment a little bit about the Pomeroy building. Obviously, I'm a little bit interested in this, being the mayor of Pomeroy, so I'm going to be involved with what comes down the road. But I kind of chuckle because, and then obviously I want to keep things going or have something in Pomeroy. But one of the comments I hear is, oh, we got this new gym in Pomeroy. It's 44 years old. I played my senior year in that gym. Okay, so it's not brand new. There are issues to look at overall. So I understand from a board standpoint that it's not a brand new building. The one major problem I see that is created for the community goes back to 1972. When that bond issue was voted on to build that gym, that we were supposed to have a gym. To the west was supposed to be an auditorium. And you were supposed to go down the north doors of that gym into the basement to all new locker rooms in the basement. And there was supposed to be another building built on to the side of it. The shop area was supposed to be double what it was. That all got cut in the energy crisis of '72 and the steel shortage. They had to drop the plans because they voted in the bond and then steel tripled, and so what we got was that gym. So, I mean, and that one of the problems is it's not really a standalone. There's no shower rooms connected to it. I think if it had been built to the specs it was designed for, it would be a lot different discussion, I think, for the board, because you would have had a truly functioning gym that could stand alone. I just bring that up and kind of forget the history of that gym.
Just real quick.
I listen to these and I understand it's hard, as you said, ma'am, it's hard to let your kids leave their home. And it's hard to lose your school. I come from the community overall, so we have lost our school, and it is. And I understand there's a lot of emotions involved in that. But you're also talking about kids coming from Pomeroy and going to Lorenz or whatever. But there's also kids that are up here. You got Havelock and you've got Rolfe. And so you're not just taking kids from Pocahontas down there. It's just a big district, like Joe said, where we just got a lot of miles. And Pocahontas is the one that's set to look at it. That's kind of what I want to say, I guess.
One thing I wanted to add, we mentioned about, I know the comment was made of utilizing the gym in Pomeroy, and that we could just spend a small fraction of money to make it a usable space, at the same time eliminating the school portion of the facility. And one of the slides on there does address that fact that if we eliminate the building portion and utilize the gym, I want to say it was somewhere around $3 million to make a gym a standalone facility. The only reason I point that out is there really isn't the option of having a gym only and not spending a significant amount of money to make it a standalone facility.
I think those bottom two numbers is what you're talking about. The second from the bottom, that number is to take the existing gym and add locker rooms. The second number from the bottom there where it says new facilities at existing gymnasium. That's to take the existing gymnasium, take care of the rest of the building, get it off of there, and then add the facilities that you need for an operating gym, which would be new locker rooms and restrooms and that sort of thing. The bottom number is to build a new gymnasium. So you can see that the difference between those two is fairly minimal. That was why we did that exercise, so that you have that data to see what those sorts of numbers might be.
Yep.
Another
One other thing I was going to point out, with regards to the facility in Pomeroy, I know we've talked about this as a board, that the boiler system, we have not really addressed that at all, has some concerns, and it's not a system that has an unlimited life. So I don't know if it's addressed in the assessment of the facilities, but
It probably is up above the mechanical.
But when we talk about the facility, if it's left alone, I know we've provided some data on the cost of keeping the facility as is, somewhere around that $50,000 to $60,000 a year. That's not addressing a boiler system that at some point is going to need to be replaced.
And what's the cost of
Mr. Kramer might have an answer to that. I really don't.
Cost of a new boiler system.
And the electrical system down there has got problems too. You're talking about replacing all the electricity, at least the breaker panels down there. And I don't even know what that would cost, because there's actually, didn't you say, Joe, that there's switches in there that are actually outdated considerably, that need to be replaced besides the boiler system?
But why would you have to put a boiler system in if you're not meeting the rest of the system?
I don't know that you would. I'm just saying that
It's all one boiler.
It's all one boiler system, correct?
You have to
It's
change-
all tied together, so,
Sure, you would have to change it, but you wouldn't have to put a new boiler.
Right.
well, depending on the age of the boiler. I think what Paul's saying is if the boiler that's there dies, it's near the end of its useful life, at some point a new boiler would have to be put in. And now that could be done to heat the gym, but then at that point you cut it off from the rest of the building. Those are all decisions that would have to be made as part of this, and that's part of what Mike's presentation is trying to show, that it's, you know, if you want to keep that as a standalone facility, you know, that's part of the discussion too. Okay, if you want to keep the gym in Pomeroy, do you let the building sit there and be empty and continue to decay, or do we need to do something with it? And so then do we as a board have to decide, do we tear it down? I see Jill raising her hand. Jill from Calhoun County Economic Development. I don't know if you want to make some comments. She was at our board meeting the other night, talked about some possibilities like housing or things like that. That's something we could look at doing too as part of this. But that's a discussion that we need to have, and I can let her talk more about that.
As you said, I'm Jill Heisterkamp. I'm Executive Director for Calhoun County Economic Development, and this actually has been on my radar. I've been on the job 3 years and 4 months. It's been on my radar for 3 years and 2 months, because I actually had people coming to my office from Pomeroy concerned about the building. So we kind of kept it on the radar. I've been talking with Jason a little bit when he was on the board. And now we're to the point where we're looking at possibly something can be done with this. And so that's why I went to the school board and talked to them a little bit about some of the ideas I had, ways we could approach, maybe even making it a use mixed building, possibly having that gym available for the school to be able to use, maybe having the city involved somehow with ownership, because they can qualify for funding to get certain things done to the building that the school can't. And as I mentioned, as it was mentioned earlier, the numbers you see up there is to make it so that it could be a K-12 school. That isn't necessarily for someone to be able to live there or to be able to open a business there or utilize it for other purposes. I'd actually taken a tour of the building recently, and for sitting as long as it has, it's actually been in pretty good condition, just because they have kept the boiler on and everything like that. If that boiler system does go down or shut off, I can guarantee you the building will deteriorate even more rapidly than anything else. I've been in a few buildings recently that have had no heat, no air conditioning, and we're to the position right now we're having to take out every plaster wall because it's been compromised in just 7 years. So if that gives you an idea. There is some water infiltration into the building, so I think parts of it may have to come down, but my goal is for in economic development, at this point right now, it is cheaper to rehab a building than it is to build a new one, especially if you want it to look nice, have character, anything like that. And so I think the opportunity would be I think if the school board's looking at having to demo the building, I think having an opportunity to partner up a little bit and talk about things with them in an open dialogue. And then also maybe getting some members of the community involved, those in Pomeroy who want to see that building saved, who have the memories. What are you willing to do to step up and maybe keep that building but in a different capacity? How can we utilize that gym, maybe even both gyms, the old gym and the new gym, for other purposes, for the community, not only just for the school, but also just to serve your community of Pomeroy. There's housing, there's daycare issues, there's so many issues in our area that I think a building of this capacity could really move forward and work towards to be able to solve some of those issues, which also then helps the school in general too, because you keep your families around if you have daycare, if you have after-school care, if you have someplace for those children to go. Those are just some of the things that we've been talking about, and I'm encouraging the school board to keep me involved, and I'll keep them involved if I hear of anything else. But as I said, this is just early in the process, and they want to make sure the community gets involved as soon as possible. But if at any point, I've got business cards with me, if there's anyone who's interested in learning more about what I've envisioned, or I have ideas for, and getting on board, or even coming up with your own ideas to bring to me, I fully welcome that. So, thank you.
More comments or questions? If not, thank you everyone for coming. As I mentioned earlier, the survey, or the presentation, the full study, and the survey link are on the district's Facebook page. Will be on the website sometime tomorrow, where you can download the full report and view it in more detail. Fill out the survey, give us your feedback, contact any of the board members. Any board members have any other comments?
If you want to discuss it.
Yep, come to a board meeting. Otherwise, thank you, Mike, for coming up tonight and doing the presentation for us. What's that?
Would the board introduce themselves?
Sure.
I'm Mike Crossgrove. I live here in town. I was appointed for a year, and then I was elected for the next 2 years to the board. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to rerun after that, because my kids will be graduated. And I believe that anybody that's on the board ought to have kids in the district at the time. But that's just my opinion.
I'm Kelly Dutcher, and I'm from Rawls.
Paul Birdie, and I'm from Pocahontas, and I'm currently the vice president of the board.
Greg Fritz from Pocahontas, president of the board.
Chris Jansen from the Palmer area.
Zach Stuplik, I live out west of town, where there's no towns. We purchased the Hammer place 7 miles west. Just to note, my kids open and enrolled here before we moved into the district. This is a good school district. Part of why I bought the place that we live in is so we could be in the school district. And got involved. I've known Jason for a little bit here with some coaching football. He said he was going to get off the board. Was looking for somebody to run, so I ran. Haven't decided if that was the smartest decision yet. One thing I wanted to note, thank you guys for coming. I recently toured the school down there. There are opportunities there, but there's also decisions that are going to have to be made fairly soon, okay? It's a nice building, and you guys should have pride in it. But there are decisions, and money's going to have to be spent. And that's your guys' money. That's our money, right? It's your money. Everybody out here. It's a great facility, but we're going to have to make some decisions. Again, thanks for coming, and I'll hand it off. I'm Wes Long.
Last chance, Mr. Kramer, do you have anything else?
Throw up a Facebook page just so you can see there's links, if you click on those, for the presentation that Mike went through today. So if you notice up on the screen, which is on the website, it's on the Facebook page, we'll move it to the website, a copy of it someplace tomorrow as well. There's a link to the presentation that was done tonight. The report in full form is a PDF that he referenced, is also linked directly on here, so the full report is also located here with the details that he referenced. There's also a feedback survey link here in order to give additional feedback and information to the board as they're looking at trying to make some decisions down the road so that we can elicit some of that feedback. So we'll ask you to please take a look at that. I know the board specifically asked me a month ago, create some way for the community to also provide some input. So it's not a terribly long survey, but it's a place to start giving some feedback in terms of how we move forward. Because they're going to be making some decisions at some point in time. If there are other community potential uses here, the report doesn't address that. That addresses the school function side of it. But there are other possibilities out there. They're just not a part of a facility study for schools. And that's just the way it is. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Glad that you came.